Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and call the Dorchester County Audit Committee to order, and if you please stand, I'll do the invocation. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you today. There's so much going on in our country that we need so many prayers for. We ask you to bless our president and bless our people in Washington as they make the right decision to guide us. We ask you to bless our state. We ask you to bless our county. And above all, God, we ask you to bless all our service people, wherever they may be. In God's holy name, pray, amen.
Amen.
Ms. Emily Kuchak is going to give us the audit report. I hope I got that name half right. Sobchak.
Yes.
Okay. Wasn't even close, was I? I've been practicing too.
It's a little tricky. All right. So I am Emily Sobchak. I am the, hello. Let's see. All right. Okay, all right, there we go. I'm the audit partner with Green Finney that oversees the county's financial statement audit. So I am here this afternoon to present the results of the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. And so my contact information is here. Please feel free to contact me anytime, not just during the audit season, but anytime throughout the year if you have questions or concerns. I'm always available to answer your questions. So when it comes to the audit and the financial report, the bulk of the responsibility really lies with the county. So the financial information included in the CAFR, all of the disclosures, all of that information is generated by your management, by the finance department. That's what they are working on day in, day out throughout the year. And so for that reason, it is very important that you have good internal controls, good policies and procedures in place to ensure that the financial information that they're providing is complete, accurate, and reliable. Our responsibility as your auditor is to audit that financial information that they provide and issue an opinion based on our audit. We did issue an unmodified opinion this year, and that opinion provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So the unmodified opinion is the opinion that you want to receive. That's the best opinion that we can give on the financial statements. So let's look at your general fund financial results. Your total fund balance increased by over $600,000, bringing total fund balance for the general fund to $30.4 million. Included in that $30 million is a portion that's referred to as non-spendable. Those are amounts that have already been spent, but they are for fiscal 20 expenditures. So they are not in spendable form at year end. You also have committed fund balance of $5.3 million. Those amounts are internally committed by council for future contingencies. You then have assigned fund balance of $1.5 million for budget carryovers. So again, that's an internal designation. And when we take out those amounts, we're left with unassigned fund balance of $23.1 million as of June 30th. So when we look at your unassigned fund balance, we think it's helpful to compare it to your operating expenditures to give you an idea of where you stand. So your unassigned fund balance of $23 million represents 40.7% of your actual 2019 expenditures, or about 39% of your budgeted 2020 expenditures. And so, as you can see, you are well within the county's policy of maintaining at least 32% of your next year's revenues in your unassigned fund balance. And so you're in a good position there, about 3 or 4 months of operating expenditures in your fund balance at year end. Now, there are a number of different reasons why it is so important to maintain that healthy fund balance. One of those reasons is that we are measuring fund balance as of June 30th, but your largest revenue source, your property tax revenues, aren't going to be coming in until about now, until January. And so you've got 6 months of cash flows that you need to be able to get through. And having a healthy fund balance allows you to meet those cash flow needs without having to use short-term financing to finance operations. Having a healthy fund balance also helps you when you're issuing debt. You get lower interest rates. Rating agencies really like to see, number one, a strong fund balance policy, which you do have in place, and number two, that you are meeting that policy and maintaining that healthy level of fund balance. So looking at your activity for the year, you had revenues of $56 million. That was about a 5% increase from the prior year due to a number of different reasons, but the primary one being property tax revenues. You were also about 5% higher than budget, and again, the main driver of that was in your property tax revenues. On the expenditure side, excuse me, we have expenditures of $56.6 million, which was about an 8% increase from the prior year. One of the larger drivers of that increase is the Pine Hill property purchase, which resulted in an increase in capital outlay compared to the prior year. That also resulted in an increase compared to budget. However, that of course was an approved disbursement. And so while you were higher than budgeted, you were within the approved amounts. Now, if we combine all of your governmental funds, so your general fund, adding on the special revenue funds, capital project funds, and your debt service fund, you're looking at total revenues and other financing sources for the year of about $131 million, and total expenditures of about $107 million. Remember, one of the main reasons for that difference, for the revenues being so much higher than your expenditures, is that you did issue those $19 million in GO bonds for the year, and you received a premium on that. And so those proceeds were received during the year, but not expended during fiscal 19. Now looking at your enterprise funds, remember these funds are reported a little bit differently from your governmental funds. They are reported on the full accrual basis, which means that in addition to reporting current assets and liabilities, like your governmental funds do, they also report long-term assets and obligations. And so for that reason, rather than reporting a fund balance, they report a net position. So for the water and sewer fund, the net position increased by about $12 million compared to the prior year. However, the bulk of that increase, as you see in the last bullet, is related to capital contributions. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is that while you do have a net position of close to $175 million in your water and sewer fund, the vast majority of that, about $151 million, represents your net investment in capital assets. Your enterprise funds are often heavily reliant on capital assets. That's certainly true for your water and sewer fund. And so it's important to remember that those assets, of course, require long-term maintenance and eventual replacement. And so there are costs related to those assets. On your solid waste fund, you had an increase in net position of $493,000. And the biggest change from the prior year on solid waste was the new Sunoco recycling contract. On your stormwater fund, you had an increase in net position of $342,000. And that was primarily a result of an increase in your stormwater revenues compared to the prior year. Now, a couple of other more unusual items that are reported on your full accrual statements, we've talked about these in the past, are your pension and retiree health care liabilities. So for the net pension liability, remember this relates to your participation in the state retirement system. This liability is a liability that you have absolutely no control over. This is your allocated piece of the state retirement system's unfunded actuarial liability. And so while it is a large number, $85.6 million as of June 30th, the more important thing to focus your attention on is the increases in your required contribution rates. So for fiscal 19, your required contribution rates were 14.5% and 17.2% for the state retirement system and the police officers' retirement system. Both of those rates increased from 1% compared to the prior year. They have increased again for fiscal 20 to 15.5% and 18.2%. And they will continue to increase until we get to fiscal 2023, when those rates will be 18.5% and 21.2%. And so as you can see, those are significant increases in your fringe benefit rates. Those rates are expected to hold at 18.5% and 21.2% for the foreseeable future once we get to fiscal 2023. And so that will have a significant impact on your budget, especially, when the bulk of your budget is in personnel costs. Those increases will have a large dollar value attached to them. So it's important when you're thinking about budgeting to keep in mind that you will see an impact on the next year, but that you will also see future impacts. And so it's an important consideration when you're considering your personnel choices. A similar liability that we are reporting is related to the retiree health care plan. Now, the big difference here is that the county has its own retiree health care plan. You do not participate in the state's plan, and so you do have some control over this liability. County council has full authority to amend the terms of the retiree health care plan. And so that's one reason why the net OPEB liability, the net retiree healthcare liability, is much smaller than your pension liability. It's $10.4 million as of June 30th. Now looking briefly at your capital assets, you have total capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation of about $350 million as of June 30th. That was a decrease of $63.2 million from the prior year. And the main reason for that decrease is that the county, of course, oversees a number of significant infrastructure projects, projects that are on state-owned roads. And so as those projects are performed, as work is completed, those costs are capitalized as construction in progress. However, when the project is finished, those assets are not owned by the county, and so they are transferred over to the state. And so you had total net disposals of close to $75 million during the year. So again, a lot of significant work that's done by the county on behalf of the state. On the long-term obligation side, your long-term debt, you had total long-term obligations of $182.6 million as of June 30th. That was an increase of $3.2 million from the prior year. And that increase is primarily related to the issuance of the GO bonds of $19 million, offset by your principal payments during the year. A couple of auditing and accounting principles just to make you aware of. There are some there are some ongoing changes related to the auditing principles, new guidance related to independence, and making sure that we as your auditor are independent, both in fact and appearance, and really looking at, are there any changes that need to be made to ensure that that clear line is drawn between what we're doing and what management is doing. And so you may see some changes next year. The audit community is still working on interpreting exactly what the guidance intends for this change. A couple of other accounting principle changes. GASB number 84 relates to fiduciary activities, and it will have some slight changes on how your 1%, how your fireman's fund is reported in fiscal 20. However, no significant change and no change to day-to-day activities. GASB number 87 provides new guidance on reporting leases. Again, this won't have a significant change in that it is an accounting change only. And so it will change how operating leases are reported. However, the day-to-day facts and circumstances of those contracts will not be changing. Now looking at your compliance reports. So we did report one significant deficiency for fiscal 19. It's primarily related to your bank account reconciliation and collateralization process. We noted that there were several accounts that were not being timely reconciled. We've discussed these issues with management, and I know that there are already changes set in place to make sure that this is corrected going forward. So we appreciate their timely response to that. We did perform a single audit this year. Remember, that is the additional compliance audit that's required on your federal awards when federal award expenditures exceed $750,000 in a single year. And so this year, we looked at 2 different programs, and I'm pleased to report that we had no significant concerns related to either of those. So in addition to the CAFR and the reports included in there, we also issue a management letter each year. That's primarily required communications to management and to the council from us. And that's a second place where we could include some significant recommendations that we have, areas where we see room for improvement in your processes and procedures. And a couple of matters noted here. One is that we noted that there are some significant time lags on when reimbursements are requested for certain grant programs. And there are a number of contributing factors to that. But again, that's something that we've discussed with management, and they've put some new procedures, changed or added some personnel time to help address what can be addressed to correct this issue. And then the second matter that we report is to formally document all accounting procedures and processes. We recommend that while the county does have documented policies and procedures, there's no comprehensive manual, no one-stop shop for identifying all of your policies and procedures. So we recommend that that's something that management work to prepare in the future. That is a significant process, and so we understand that's something that will take time. So, in conclusion, y'all are really doing a great job. Council has done a good job of, again, like I said, addressing our concerns. Management has been wonderful to work with. Daniel, Jessica, all of their team have really done a great job. It's a lot of hard work getting through the audit process, and so we appreciate all the time that they put into that and trying to make our job a little easier. So I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have.
Any question, Ms. Upchak?
I got a couple things.
Yes, sir.
One, first of all, I'm glad to hear that we have an unmodified opinion. That sounds incredible. And I'm sure Tiffany's already tweeted out unmodified opinion to everybody so that the public's aware that that is something we got. It's nice to see that. I'm also, if you'd come back and said that we were perfect, I would have been a little disappointed. So I was not glad to see some recommendations, but at the same time, I'd like to get maybe just a little bit of feedback on some of these things. Is this a staffing issue as far as not doing reconciliations, or just a procedural issue? I mean, where were we slow on that? Is that something we can just sort of address?
We had some changes in personnel in the treasurer's office.
Okay.
That's a function that they're ultimately responsible for.
Okay.
Daniel has met with the treasurer's office. We have an opportunity to move some positions from that function to the business services department.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Okay.
to make it more timely. There was assistance provided, but we actually had the person that was responsible who retired.
Okay. That clears that up. Thank you, sir. And thank you.
Any other questions, anybody?
Just a comment.
And nice job, everyone. Thank you very much, staff and y'all. Appreciate that.
No, Mr. Chairman, I was going to say that was one of the fastest yet most succinct presentations we've had in years. Well done. That's a lot of information in a short period of time, so thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Upchak, right?
Yep.
Thank you for a great presentation. Thank you for keeping us straight, and I'm glad we got a good report.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good job.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, sir, do I have an issue, motion, we adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Motion on the floor, second, and all in favor? 7-0, we adjourn. Water and sewer is at 5:30. Joe. David, do you have any problem with these people being reappointed to the? You didn't get an email on that from Jason Jason Ragland?
I don't remember seeing that.
Oh, yeah, you sent it.
Did you send it? When did you send it? You want me to look at it over the weekend? I don't have any. I don't have any.
Gee, well, I'll let you read it. We got time.
Hold on. No, it's a whole lot better than you.
They all attend. Yeah.
It's understood as a conservation, not a preservation committee. And that was-
Conservation.
yeah. I had a hard time understanding that before. They thought it was a preservation.
Jay. Really? Do you have any problem with putting the gentleman back on the for gates of Orangeburg Regional Pump Station.
You looking for a motion?
Yeah, I
I'm
don't,
gonna give you that, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, sir, I appreciate it. Any questions, sir?
Feeling generous.
We have,
We're a little rusty.
all in favor? 7-0, thank you, gentlemen.
Sure.
All right, request for approval of new sewer service by RHL Land Investments LLC for 102 lot subdivision of Orangeburg Road near the town of Somerville, TMS number 128-00000134. And this was recommended by Water and Sewer.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So we have capacity for this, Mr. Ward?
Beckburn?
We have capacity for this?
Yes, sir. Man shaking his head yes. In the report, it said yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? 7-0. Ms. Harriet, you got a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I motion that we adjourn.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second to adjourn. Any questions? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Crosby, you up at 5:40. So
5:40. Yes, sir.
be all right if we just sit there and listen to you?
meeting at this time. The invocation was shared by our chairman earlier. So we're going to move for expediency, for time's sake. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invocation. There's been a recommendation for approval of changes to the Dorchester County Human Resources Policy Manual with respect to the drug-free workplace policy and related sections. Do I have a motion for the recommendation?
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
At this time, before we move in to the second, Mr. Prentice, if you would come, just give us a brief summary. I think it's Mr.
Is it me or is it?
Neither one of us.
No, it was Mr. Oh, he's stepped out. Oh,
Mr. Hargit.
Mr. Hargett stepped out. Sorry, gentlemen.
I feel better. I thought I was.
No, it was
I
Mr.
thought I was
Hargett.
missing something.
Do it anyway. No, just do
I thought I was missing something. Thank goodness.
Yes. However.
I apologize, Mr. Hargett. I didn't see you slip out.
We need you to second.
So, Mr. Hargett, just to recap, there's a recommendation by staff for approval of changes to the Dorchester County Human Resources Policy Manual with respect to the drug-free workplace policy and related sections. Ms. Hallman approved the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Before we take a vote, I'd like Mr. Prentice to come up for just a brief summary, just to kind of highlight some of the updates for us.
All right, thank you. And I know we're short on time, so I won't go through everything, but does anyone have any specific questions about anything that you found in the packet before I go through some of the high points? Okay. So I wanted to just touch on a few areas that I found to be important and just kind of indicate what some of these changes are. We made several changes to the drug-free workplace policy with respect to things that we found that were not necessarily in practice. I'll give you an example. There were some references in pre-employment testing to both drug and alcohol testing, and it's never been our practice to conduct alcohol testing at the pre-employment stage. For obvious reasons, alcohol is something that's permissible to consume outside of working hours, and in the policy, we have a threshold of 0.04, is what's allowable as far as what somebody can blow. And so when somebody's not employed and they're just going in for their drug test pre-employment, alcohol would not be relevant. So that's an example of something that was changed. Some things that are more relevant to current events, just to give you an idea. You've probably heard in the news over the last few months about various different changes with the federal reversal on the ban of CBD oil and some of the THC or hemp-based products. And so one thing that we added in here was some language to indicate that even if employees are to consume CBD oil or utilize CBD oil that's not regulated by the FDA, that those things, if they contain THC and somebody is subject to a drug test for any reason, that they would be considered a positive result because there's no way to differentiate between THC from someone who smokes marijuana versus somebody that uses CBD oil if it has THC present in the substance. We also included language to discuss people who may travel out of state or out of the country to areas where the consumption of marijuana is legal or the possession of marijuana is legal. And so if somebody returns to the state and returns to work and is subject to a drug test for either random or post-accident for any reason, if they had that substance in their system, they would still be subject to disciplinary action. So those are things that have come up just societally over the last year or so as more states have changed their stance on the legality of those substances. A couple other things. We did make some major changes to the post-accident drug testing policy, and there were some criteria before whether the accident involved a fatality, the employee was cited to be at fault, an ambulance was caused to the scene, or there were disabling damages to a vehicle. We've tweaked those slightly. The one regarding the ambulance being caused to the scene is amended to discuss whether the accident caused bodily injury that requires medical care. And the reason for that is we have injuries after accidents where someone might not call an ambulance, but they do go to Concentra or doctor's care to receive treatment. And so that medical care would still be applicable. We also changed E, which is the accident resulted in property damage of $2,000 or more. And so instead of just, disabling damage to a vehicle, there's a lot of instances where property damage is related to someone's home or related to a mailbox or something like that. And so we wanted some kind of an estimated dollar threshold for what would be considered significant enough for us to warrant a drug test. And so that's kind of that bright line that's installed in the language. And then the other most significant change, if you look in the very back, there's this Appendix 8, and this is a new form that we're recommending to add to the HR policy manual. And this is the reasonable suspicion testing checklist. Previously, the policy only had 4 or 5 different criteria listed in the policy manual for what was eligible for us to consider reasonable suspicion testing. And we kind of had this just boilerplate form that we would send everybody through in determining whether or not something was eligible for reasonable suspicion. What this form does is it takes into consideration various different body mechanic issues, walking, talking, the way people act, and there's a checklist for each of those different conditions for a supervisor to go through. And then they have to go all the way up to the county administrator's office and seeking approval for that. And then there's discussion on how they confront the employee, how the test is conducted, and how the results are evaluated so that it's more formally documented in the policy. But those are the most significant high points from what I can see. There were a lot of other text changes. There were other references to the policy being called a substance abuse policy, and we've consistently referred to it now as the drug-free workplace policy throughout. So a lot of different just formal or formatting tweaks and things like that were made as well.
Any questions? Mr. Prentice, thank you and the committee for your time. I mean, outstanding. And from going over this with you in detail, the one key note that I found was the attention to detail that makes our employees safer, right? Which in turn makes the community safer and more secure. So thank you very much.
And if I can add, like
Yes.
we talked about earlier, this is not meant to be a gotcha policy. It's meant to tie to safety and overall workplace safety for employees. We always do encourage employees, if they know that they have a drug or substance abuse issue, to come to the county. We've contracted with EAP providers, alcohol and drug, and we can offer them resources to ensure that they get the help that they need before they end up in a situation that results in an accident or results in them getting caught.
What was the percentage again, Mr. Prentice, about the lack of, or excuse me, in terms of claims made for workers' compensation that was down?
So,
would you mind highlighting that for in regards to this as well?
We were at a 1.52, which is 52% worse than the norm as far as our peer group in 2016, and we're down to a 1.22 this year. So, we've decreased our experience modifier for workers' comp, and we do believe, of course, that policies like this help us have a safer environment for our employees to continue to decrease that mod and to continue to save on the cost of workers' comp and employee care.
Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor? Unanimous. All right. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Adjourn.
It's I don't even know what day is the 6th. January 6th, 2020, Planning, Development, and Building Committee meeting to order. Invocation was offered earlier this evening. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first item is a public hearing and recommendation for second reading of rezoning request number 796 by Anthony Conway to rezone .84 acre located at 153 Prince Edward Drive near Somerville, TMS number 128-11-10, I'm sorry, do this TMS number again. TMS number 128-11-02-001 and 128-11-02-002 from transitional residential district to single-family residential manufactured housing district R1M, and I will open the public hearing.
Yes, sir. This item, for your consideration, is a .84 acre tract located in Knightsville Farm subdivision, currently zoned TRM, which is a 1 acre minimum. There's 3 dwelling units on it right now, 1 site-built home, two manufactured homes, which is legal nonconforming within the TRM zoning district, only allowed one dwelling unit per parcel. The request is to rezone to single-family residential R1M, which would allow manufactured homes, but it would be a 1/3 acre minimum lot size. There is water and sewer in the area, but the neighborhood has developed with this near 1 acre lot size, and it's right near Greenwood Ranches, which is a much larger lot sizes, I think about 3 acres minimum lot size in that neighborhood. So with the rezoning to R1M, it would allow them to subdivide the lot. I think the intent is to sell, but regardless of that, it would change the character of the existing neighborhood. So all of a sudden, it would allow set that precedent for other lots to come in and rezone to a smaller lot size. So for that reason, the staff recommended denial of the request, and it went to Planning Commission in November for their consideration. They also recommended denial of the request.
Thank you. Any questions? Does anyone want to, I've actually got a couple. Does anyone in the audience want to speak on this issue? Please. So just give your name and address and.
Thomas Fagan, 111 Ponderosa Road. I live right down Ponderosa from this. This came about, the Smiths originally moved in there. They had a little store on that corner there. And this was back in the late 60s, early 70s. All right. Now, their kids grew up, and their kids were kind of old when they came there, so they put trailers in there. And the trailers were very old and dilapidated. And it went through, the Smiths died, they sold the place off. Anthony Ferrero owned it, and then Mr. Conway bought it. And now there's 3 units on less than an acre. All the rest of the places there, pretty much everything in Greenwood Ranches, which that is a part of Greenwood Ranches, is TRMS. You have to have a minimum of 1 acre per residence. Okay, there's 3 residences on less than an acre. And even though there is sewer run there, which he should be tapped into the sewer bare minimum, to divide the price up for all of us, make it cheaper for everybody. But he replaced the septic tanks, and he put the trailers are sitting on top of this drain fields, and if you walk out the door, you actually come down on one of the septic tanks. I watched the whole thing go on. I talked with Mr. Hearn and I talked with Mr. Bailey. Both of them came out back in 2015 when this first started. The trailers that were on it were old and dilapidated. He brought new trailers in. Okay, and then he started work on the house. When he started work on the house there, the trailers, he rented them out. Well, then there were problems. LC was spending all kinds of resources out there. You see the woods right in behind it, over across the street. Cops were out there chasing people through the woods and gunshots and stuff down there. Hypodermic needle syringes into ditches, because there are spaces where there isn't anybody. And when there's nobody, people will come and park and then chunk the hypodermic needles out the windows. We still have a little problem with that out there, even though we ride pretty regular. There's several of us in the neighborhood that take pride in our neighborhood. But now he has gotten a C of O. It was over 2 years, right at 3 years, that the house did not have a C of O. Okay, now there's almost a 3-year period, a break of a 3-year period with only 2 residences. Mr. Hearn told me at that time, it'd been over 2 years. He can't do that. Well, he got in touch with the planning commission, I guess, because the building permits disappeared off of the building. Work stopped. Okay. Later in 2017, Mr. Conway sells the property to himself, 153 Prince Edward LLC. His name's no longer on it. Okay, but look out for Mr. Conway. He can't do this. It's been over 2 years. He's not supposed to do this. He lost his grandfather on it. Okay, he goes down, he files, he gets a C of O. From what I understand, there was a change of personnel in the planning department. And he gets a C of O. Because there's no name, it's a whole new name. He still owns the place. And things have gotten better because I know some of the people that are living there and I can approach them directly when they're partying, because right across the street, Mr. Red and Carol live there, and they're very old. Mr. Red's probably in his 80s. People out there partying, jumping up and down, loud music, gunshots and stuff in the middle of the night, that just ain't jiggy. That man's sick in his house over there. And I'm just wondering, how did this get overcome? I can see how the paperwork could have slid through the planning department. After the 2 years, he changed the name on everything. New people over there, nobody's looking out for it. Dorchester County's growing by leaps and bounds. They got 1 million papers coming through a day. But now we're going to have 3 there. We're not going to have very good people coming in the future if should things change in the future. Living that close on top of septic tanks. Now, things wasn't so bad this past year. We were in drought all summer. All summer long we were in drought. But before, you couldn't ride your bicycle down those streets and make that corner, make that circle there where there's no traffic or anything because of the stench. And you could see the green algae growing in all the ditches. Don't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's causing that. You have all that wastewater and they're not hooked into the county sewer system. And that place doesn't even conform to have 1 residence on it, much less 3. This guy doesn't live there. It'd be different if he lived there, because if he lived there, he'd do something about it. He wouldn't live in that. This man lives in Mount Pleasant, and he rents that out. You know, I'm asking for help. Now, we had some help before because they pulled the permits off the building and the work stopped on the house. And there was only, and from what I understand, he was going to pull 1 of the trailers out and keep the house. And if you'll look on the county council meeting 03/16/2015, he said that when the house was brought up, that he would, during that council meeting, he made reference to it, and it's reference to him in the minutes of that meeting, that he would tap the house in, that he'd already paid. Now, if he's already paid these sewer tap-in fee, why didn't the house tap in? She just said that it's not tapped in, that it's on a septic tank too. I'm just asking for some relief, and I'm told that that can go on forever. Anytime one of the trailers gets older, he can just replace it forever and ever and ever. That his grandfather and pre-existing clauses, this can happen forever. I'm just wondering, like I was telling Mr. Chennis, Mr. Hearn down the street, before Mama built a big house there, we had a fire and lost the house there. Well, she owned Checker Taxi, and we probably had about 600, 800, maybe 1,000 cars on the property. So do I get pre-existing conditions and turn it into a junkyard forever and ever and ever? How does that pertain to me? I've got a nice house. There's a lot of nice houses going in. Right across the street, the man had to put up a privacy fence right across the street, right across from Marie Street. There's an 8-foot privacy fence running all the way down Marie because of all of the stuff that was going on and the gunshots and stuff that was going on there. You try to make the neighborhood better, people building big houses, they're making big expenditures, and then we have this. We're asking for some help with this, because this is killing all of our property values. You have to pass that. Ponderosa is right there, the road coming up to it, the far road. You have to come right out past it. And it kills, I mean, everybody going into the neighborhood, that's the main thoroughfare right there going in on Marie. And it's killing all our property values. I just asked for some help. How long does this go on? This has been in, from what I understand, TRMS, the TRM district came in 1984. That was 35 years ago. It's been non-compliant for over 35 years. How long can non-compliance run in Dorchester County? Even 20 years is, that's pretty good, you know, but over 35 years? We're just asking for some help for the rest of the neighborhood. We were told that this would not happen, that there would only be 2 residences there. That would help a lot. Maybe in the future, you know, one of the other trailers. There'll be something about trailers that you can't replace trailers, mobile homes, forever and ever and ever, which was explained to me by the building department, that if you have a mobile home on a piece of property, you can get a replacement permit forever. You know, they could have one like going into Pine Forest. Have one going into Ashboro, you know, if it was pre-existing. What are the rules on this? Now, this, I've read it from one end to the other, back and forth. I don't see a grandfather clause in this at all. This is the ordinance. There's no grandfather clause in here that I've seen. I have looked in the county and the state code for a pre-existing, and I haven't been able to find that either. Can somebody tell me where that is?
Mr. Fagan, if I might, and we've got a couple issues here, and I tend to agree with you on some of them. I think we need clarification in this specific issue. I think the discussion is the actual rezoning of this. And I'm going to ask you just bluntly, as bluntly as I can, do you support or oppose the rezoning?
I oppose the rezoning because if you rezone that piece, then everybody in the whole neighborhood's going to want a half-acre lot, and the density's going to go up.
Okay. All right. There, and like I said, I don't disagree. I think there's some other issues we probably need to address as well, but in this specific one, I just wanted to get a very clear point. And I have a question to ask in regards to this. As I look at this map, is this not a request for spot zoning?
Well, spot zoning, it's a little tricky because it's single-family residential, the existing zoning, the proposed zoning is single-family residential, and they both would be supported by the comprehensive plan. So I hesitate to say it would necessarily be spot zoning, but it's a different character.
It's not TRM.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it may be single-family residential, but it's not.
Correct.
And I'm going to be very black and white, that it's not R1, it's TRM.
Correct.
So that's the difference. And some of the other issues he has, I'm certain that we probably need to discuss it in the future. I don't disagree with some of the notes I had, but any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment, the Planning Commission and I guess maybe the Planning Department both, they're concerned about the precedents
Correct.
of going to this, and I certainly agree with that as well, so thank you.
So the recommendation is for a rezoning request to rezone from TRM to R1M. Is there anyone, I don't want to ask the leading question that way. Is there a motion?
We're,
I'm sorry.
yes, sir.
Any other questions in the public hearing? I got ahead of myself.
Yeah,
I will close the public hearing. Okay.
I have a motion.
Okay.
I recommend that we deny this request for rezoning.
So there is a motion to deny the request. Is there a second?
Second that.
There is a second. All in favor? It is unanimous for denial. Thank you. We have one other item on the agenda, public hearing and recommendation for second reading of an ordinance amending the 2018 Dorchester County Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map. I'm going to assume you're going to, I know why we're changing it, but you're going to explain to everybody else why we're changing it. So I will open the public hearing.
Yes, sir. As you all know, we adopted the 2018 comprehensive plan this month last year. As part of that, one element of the comprehensive plan is the future land use map and the future land use recommendations for the county. As we were going through a meeting that we held last year, it was discovered that there was Winding Woods Industrial Park. The future land use recommendation for that was not employment mixed use as we would have anticipated. It was overlooked and it was zoned for single family or low density residential, medium density residential. So we decided to take a look at this and look at some of the other industrial areas to make sure that the comprehensive plan reflected what we're trying to achieve, to make sure that there were no conflicts as we move forward with economic development projects. So when we went through, we took a look at the future land use map. You can see we circled a couple areas. So key among those were the Winding Woods Park, Bosch, Showadenko, Key West Boats, the Eastport Industrial Park, Ashley River Lumber. So we looked at all those and corrected the future land use map to reflect what we would recommend for those areas. So they switched from either rural or low density or medium density to an employment mixed use. In most cases, the industry is already there. In some cases, even the zoning is there, but still having the future land use map recommend these types of uses is key to moving forward with the economic development projects for the county. So staff recommended approval, and Planning Commission, when they reviewed it at their meeting, they also recommended approval of the amendment.
Any questions from the audience? Any comments from the audience? I will close the public hearing and ask if there are any questions from here. Just to restate what you said, we're not changing anything. We're simply making certain that the areas that either our oversight, can't see the forest for the trees, their intended use was mixed use, industrial type, or existing. All we're doing is fixing that map to identify what everybody.
Correct. These are areas that we have already we already have economic development projects, or we anticipate economic development projects.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move for second reading of the ordinance amending the 2018 Dorchester County Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
Sure.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous. Any further motions?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor? We are adjourned.
For the January 6th to order, and I would ask that everyone stand. I'm going to ask Mr. Hargay if you give us the invocation, please, sir. And the pledge to the flag.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this day and for the blessings of life that you give us. Thank you for Dorchester County, for every citizen. We serve each person. They are the boss of this council, and may we be reminded of that at all times. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to do the business of Dorchester County. May we do it according to your will and your purpose. And Lord, at this time in our country, we pray especially for those men and women in uniform that are protecting us tonight, this very night, so that we might have a meeting like this. Protect them and bring them home, I pray. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda, request to address council. Well, let's see, I got a lady here by the name of Peggy Bangle.
She seems to be busy,
Peggy?
Mr. Chairman.
You're up. Your 3 minutes counting now. You're up.
Peggy Bangle, 114 Ravenwood Court. First, Happy New Year, welcome back. It's nice to know it's actually a Monday night. I've lost total track of days and weeks and times, and since Thanksgiving, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. As we begin the new year, I ask, as always, to be very cognizant of what's going on, whenever you're proposing new rules, ordinances, legislation, whatever you want to call it, always ask yourself before you pass it, what could possibly go wrong? What are the unintended consequences of what's being passed? And I'll just use, even though not at your level, Act 388 to reiterate that sometimes things cannot be what they seem as we struggle through that still. That is not me. Also, as get ready to do new road projects and all, I would request that the roads that we already have be fixed before we build more to be repaired. It hasn't been that long since Charlie Road has been resurfaced, and it's already in need of resurfacing again. It's starting to fall apart quickly. Midland Parkway, where Mr. Hearn has an office, how long ago was that repaved, Mr. Hearn? Not long.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and it's already in need of major repairs again. Either we need to get better contracts and better bed put in and rebar maybe or something, because this is, before we start building new roads, we need to fix the potholes we currently have. It's very frustrating to need front-end alignment on occasion when you really shouldn't. And I don't charge the county because I can't prove which pothole I went over that did it. There are many things coming up. It's tax season, it's been very busy at the treasurer's office. I know Daniel will be happy to hear that. We've been collecting a lot of money there, and I would encourage also for those of you that have constituents that have struggled to make payments, to get them on the installment plan. As long as this year's taxes are paid by the 15th of January, they can enroll for next year, come December, not owe much money. And we have many citizens, taxpayers that do that find it very beneficial to themselves. Elections are coming up. We need poll workers. And there'll be training soon for the one in February, but also June 9th is the primary where some of you might be involved. And you want to have good poll workers. That takes training, and they do actually get paid to work on the polls. Now, from 6 a.m. to 7:30 at night or 8 o'clock, you get $135. I'm not sure that's being paid. It's almost volunteer, but it is beneficial. If you're 16 or 17, you can still work. And the other things, those of you that go to high schools, remember, if you'll be 18 by November 3rd, you can register to vote and vote in the primaries. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I might, I think both of the roads you named actually are, you should call the DOT. I think both of those are state roads.
It's still on our roads. We're still paying for them.
Mr. Thomas Fegan. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. Miss Benton, in England, they drive on the left-hand side of the road. Dorchester County, we drive on what's left of the road. Not too many tickets for going over the yellow line, dodging where you're going to lose a tire. No, I would just like to know, on this zoning rules and everything that we have to live by, the first one was in '84 and the last one was in '04. Where do you find the pre-existing and the grandfather clause? I haven't found it. Where would I find that in county law or state law? This is the law that you guys passed. Where's the law that says you can do something else? Or the caveat in this that says you can do something else? Can anyone point me to that? Then Dorchester County gave permits illegally by this. And if that's illegal, would a class action lawsuit be in order? Would you like to represent us, Mr. Chennis?
I'm not an attorney. I'm the father of one.
In the neighborhood that their property values are hurt? You know, there's several things to look at here. But getting back to the roads, we don't have to worry about those potholes so much because you can only do 5, 10 miles an hour during rush hour. So you're not going to tear your car up so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate it. Next item is adoption of minutes from December 9th, 2019 County Council meeting and December the 17th, 2019 special call council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Any correspondence, Mr. Ward?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have Mr. Daniel T. Prentice, Dorchester County Deputy Administrator, CFO, for presentation November the 2019 monthly budget report, sir.
All right, I have the November report for you here this evening, and then I'll have the December report for you on the 21st. So this is slightly dated, as we're now in January, and we have approached very closely the January 15th property tax deadline, and a lot of those tax receipts have come in. In the general fund, total budget for this fiscal year as amended is $61.3 million. Revenues year-to-date are $11.1 million, and expenditures are $24.6 million. A couple of categorical items. Business license makes up 65% in the year-to-date within their category, and then EMS charges for services make up 48.1% of the year-to-date within that category. Go over to the capital fund. Total budget for this fiscal year is $6.3 million. Revenue is $621,000 to date, and expenditures of $1.2 million. The majority of that is items that were carried over from the prior year, as well as items that we have approved to purchase before January to get some projects moving. Oops. In the fire fund, total budget for this year is $7.9 million, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Revenues year-to-date of $976,000, and expenditures year-to-date of $3.2 million. Expenditures are running under budget. However, that budget amendment from month over month is a result of the reimbursement resolution that County Council passed. You'll see down there in expenditure note D, expenditures included the payoff of the truck acquired from Ashley River Fire Department, but then we also processed a transfer to the general fund in anticipation of receiving lease purchase proceeds. We've ordered 6 fire trucks from Pierce and 1 pumper tanker from Midwest Fire. The pumper tanker has been received at the St. George station, and so that's been paid. And then we will be paying out the first engine that's coming in from Pierce in May of 2020. The remaining 5 will come in November of 2020. So that's kind of where that's coming from. So we anticipate closing on the lease purchase closer to November of this year. In the water and sewer fund, total budget is $33 million, and total revenues year-to-date are $11.9 million, and total expenses of $14.4 million. No major notes to make there. All debt service payments made in the fall were posted back in October. Stormwater fund, total budget of $3.6 million, revenues of $313,000. Again, that with solid waste as well. Those revenues come in on the tax bills, and expenses of $1.2 million. And then lastly, in the solid waste fund, total budget of $8.5 million, revenues of $678,000, and expenses of $2.6 million. No other major notes there. That does include, as far as the budget, all of the funds approved by County Council for debris removal from Hurricane Dorian. And we've submitted all of our initial project worksheets for Hurricane Dorian to get reimbursed for those amounts from FEMA. And that concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Ward, you're up, sir.
Mr. Chairman and Council, I have several items for your consideration. The first is first reading referral to the Planning Development and Building Committee for public hearing and recommendation regarding rezoning request number 797 by Thomas Limehouse to rezone 8.33 acres located at Major Drive near Somerville, TMS number 12905100003, 12905100004, 12905100005, 12905100006, 12905100007, 12905100008, 12905100009, 12505090007, 12905090008, 12905090009, 129050910, 129-0509-011, 129-0509-012, 129-0509-013, 129-0509-014, 129-09-06009, 129-09-06010, and 129-09-06011. That's a request to rezone from single-family residential manufactured housing district R1M to multifamily residential district R4. I ask that you approve first reading and refer to the Planning Development and Building Committee for further consideration.
There's a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, did you leave out one of the TMS numbers? All in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Oh,
question.
okay, Mr. Hardy, go ahead.
I'm going to vote for this for first reading, but I have a major concern about this when it goes forward, especially the PDB. So I will vote for first reading.
All right. Any other questions?
You had a motion, where's your second? You had a motion, where's your second?
Have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All in favor? 7-0.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6-1. I apologize.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
I need to look a little harder down the road.
Next item I have for your consideration is first reading referral to the Planning Development and Building Committee for a public hearing and recommendation regarding rezoning request number 798 by Chilton Rogers to rezone 109.46 acres located at West 5th North Street near Somerville from absence of control AC to single-family residential district R2 TMS number 110000020. Ask for first reading referral to the committee.
So moved.
Second. Sorry.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0, Mr. Ward.
The next item I have for your consideration is a request for approval to reallocate unspent Series 2010 GO bond proceeds to conservation projects. Very specifically, the amount is $749,215.92, which is the amount of the requested reallocation. Ask for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion?
Question.
Question, Mr.
I
Hardy?
noticed on one of these, there was a payment to a law firm, not to a project. What was that all about? Was that for a bond?
There's a specific bond work that was paid to Hainsworth Sinclair Boyd. Yes, sir.
That's my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? 7-0, Mr. Ward.
Next item I have for your consideration is a request for approval of an additional $23,524 from the Solid Waste Fund for the purpose of funding debris removal and monitoring services associated with Hurricane Dorian. Council had previously approved an amount. This amount was to cover the remaining total that was outstanding, and as previously indicated by Mr. Prentice, we are seeking FEMA reimbursement. Ask for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Any questions? All in favor? Mr. Ward?
Next item I have for your consideration is a request for approval to provide a pay increase to most countywide elected officials in accordance with the Human Resources Policy Manual. Very specifically, covered by these increases would be the auditor, clerk of court, register of deeds, sheriff, treasurer, and probate judge, and ask for your approval as recommended.
But not county council.
Not county council, very specifically those that I indicated, sir.
So moved.
Just want people to hear that.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's a question.
Any question? Mr. Hargett, sir?
I noticed the coroner's was the only one that was called out specifically to get up to the midpoint or beyond, and I think that's well justified. That's a tough job, and he does a great job. But here's my question. All the other people that are mentioned, are they at the midpoint? Is that why they're getting a raise? Or do we know if they're at the midpoint?
That's a good question. And looking at the increases very specifically, if you'll look at the item within your packet, we've included, I apologize, give me 1 second.
With this?
Yeah. No, that's not it. That's not it. Mr. Hargett, some of them are not at the midpoint. No, sir.
So we would be giving a raise to people that are not at the midpoint. Well, then I would not support this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? 6-1, thank you. Mr. Ward.
Final item is a request for approval to revise the sheriff's office deputy pay to incentivize the great individuals that hire and modify how base pay and incentive pay are recorded at payroll. Our recommendation is to provide the opportunity for those that are degreed to receive that at hire and to separate the incentive pay for base pay going forward from those that are receiving that after June 30, 2019. Ask for your approval.
So moved.
There's a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? 7-0. Thank you, sir. Earlier today, the audit committee met and we had a good presentation from Mrs. Emily Sozak, the CPA partner for Green Finner, and she gave us one good report. County's in good shape, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay. We don't need to vote on it.
Unmodified opinion. Hashtag.
We don't need to vote. Next item, we're going now, early today at 5:30. The Water and Sewer Department met, and we took up two items. One of them was a recommendation for approval of a cost-sharing agreement for gates at Orangeburg Regional Pump Station.
You've heard the recommendation of the committee. All in favor?
Aye.
7-0, Mr. Chairman.
Second item, request for approval of sewer service by DHL Land Investors LLC for 102 lot subdivision off Orangeburg Road near the town of Somerville, TMS number 128-0000-00134.
You've heard the recommendation of the committee. All in favor? Or 7-0, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And again, earlier today, the Administrative and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee had met at 5:45. Mr. Crosby.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a recommendation for approval of changes to the Dorchester County Human Resources Policy Manual with respect to the drug-free workplace policy and related sections. That recommendation passed unanimously by committee.
You heard the recommendation of the committee. All in favor? 7-0. Later that day at 5:45 and ran in 10 minutes after 6, Mr. This is Planning Development and Building Committee met.
Mr. Chairman, we had two items on the agenda, public hearing and recommendation for second reading of rezoning request number 796 by Anthony Conway to rezone .84 acre located at 153 Prince Edward Drive near Somerville, TMS number 128-11-02-001 and 128-11-02-002 from transitional residential district TRM to single-family residential manufactured housing district R1M. That recommendation was denied.
All right, you heard the recommendation of the committee. Any questions? All in favor? 7-0. Mr. Jennings?
Second item we had was a public hearing and recommendation for the second reading of an ordinance amending the 2018 Dorchester County Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map. That received a positive recommendation, 7-0.
Thank you. Again, you heard the recommendation of the committee. Any questions? All in favor? Okay. Any appointments to the Board of Commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and let's see, I'm starting my 20th year of service on county council. I cannot believe it, spanning over 25 years. This is a first tonight. I have an appointment of a gentleman who has entered the transfer portal here. He is leaving the CTC and is headed to the DCTA. I'd like to appoint Mr. Webb Sharpie to the DCTA.
Wait a minute. We don't want him to move yet, do we? Is there a second? All right, and Mr. Webb Sharpie from the CTC to DCTA. All right, all in favor? 7-0. Any other appointments to the Board of Commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Byers, sir.
I've got, we've received information from the clerk regarding the Conservation Commission, and it is time to reappoint those members. The chairman has asked that everyone is interested in serving again, so if it pleases this body, I'm going to make a recommendation for each of them individually as a whole. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we reappoint Mr. Josh Ragland, Mr. Derek Finney, Mr. Howard, or Mac Balkman, Mr. Howard Bridgman, Mr. Robert McKinnon, Mr. Bart Sabine, and Mr. Pete Weathers Jr. for
So
the
moved.
Conservation Commission.
There's a motion and a floor and a second. All in favor? 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
And Mr. Chairman, I do have one more.
All right, sir?
I would like to, we have an appointee for the Board of Disabilities and Special Needs. We just need to change up. So I'd like to make my appointee for District 7, Dr. Troy Schiedenhelm, who is a licensed clinical mental health counselor.
Good.
And he was appointed earlier, I believe, by Mr. Crosby. The governor's already looked. However, Mr. Crosby had an appointee already there. So we're just shifting him over to my appointee, which I'm totally fine with. He seems to be very qualified as a licensed clinical mental health counselor to be able to help with this, and I'm excited to be able to have him on. I know we've already talked about that.
Sound like a good person. Got a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor? Any other appointments to Board of Commission? Mr. Frampton, County Attorney time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item I have for your consideration would be second reading of an ordinance amending the agreement we have with Orangeburg County for a joint county industrial park to include property of May River Industries. I would recommend the second reading of that ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? I'll ask him that later. Okay, Mr. Frampton?
Next, Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate council's consideration of the adoption of a resolution, again, amending our multi-county park agreement with Orangeburg County. This, however, is for property in Orangeburg County, and therefore it only requires the adoption of a resolution adding that property. I request adoption of the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Frampton?
Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate council's consideration of going into executive session to discuss one contractual matter, that being the East Edisto Development Agreement.
So moved. Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Gentlemen, let's go into executive session and make up this 10 minutes.
Apologize.
Yeah.
Mr.
You
Chairman.
gotta have humor in this business.
I do have to tell you, I said 7-0 out of committee.
Mr. Frampton.
Chairman, executive session. Council discussed the previously announced contractual matter, but no action was taken.
Ms. Holman?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that we adjourn.
Mr. Crosby, will you second that? There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? We adjourn.